Hi, you're listening to the podcast of MiGiS, Migrant Girls in Sports, Never Behind Again. The project is organized by Europamente, Bulgarian Sports Development Association, and Roes Cooperativa as a synergy supported by the European Union. Disclaimer: this episode in particular discusses topics related to war and in specific the war in Ukraine.
Hi, who are we with today? Can you introduce yourself?
Of course. My name is Alina. I'm a Ukrainian artist, creativity teacher, right now also community builder and leader, and technically also refugee in Italy.
Can you tell us a bit about your life story if you want, and some details about yourself?
Well, I was born in Ukraine, Poltava city. Right now it's a central part of Ukraine, a little bit closer to the border with Russia. And I grew up there actually doing different types of sports. I did choreography, dancing, and sport was always, important part of my life as I grew up. And at the age of 19, I left Ukraine to go to study in London as a fashion designer. I lived there for a bit. And after that, I moved to China, where I stayed for almost 10 years. And in China I was doing a lot of different things, but it was always around creativity, arts, fashion. And before the war especially, I was really focusing on another sport that I discovered for myself, which was capoeira. So when the war started, I was about to return home to Ukraine. It was a very particular time because I already sent all parcels, to Ukraine. I had my ticket in 2 weeks. So I was like, I had my cat. So I did all the documents for my cat, and we were just literally just counting days, to go back to Ukraine. And then, one morning I wake up and I see a message from my brother. It started, we are being bombarded. It was a very surreal situation, So I waited for a couple of weeks because we all thought that it will stop. It will be like, 10 days war and that's it. So first I waited there. And then when I had my ticket, it was first to Turkey and then supposedly to Ukraine. I knew I have to leave China anyway because my contract ended, my visa was ending, and it was not even safe to stay in China as Ukrainian activist. There's like another part of that, unfortunately. But I came to Italy just using my ticket to Turkey and then flight to Italy. And I thought it would be just to wait again, couple of more weeks, a couple of months, maybe, so I could again go back home. I waited in Italy for like 6 months, and it was like literally just waiting, just, every day you just read the news. You are not integrated, because you do not want to accept the reality. Your brain is just thinking that, maybe today it ends, maybe another day it's. So after 6 months in Italy, I did my attempt to go back to Ukraine. So I did the journey, my hero's journey to go back, because it's not easy right now to travel to and inside Ukraine. So through Poland, I arrived in Lviv. It was very particular, adventurous trip. In the first day, there was 80 bombs during the night. So I was sleeping for 5 hours and I woke up with 80 bombs around Ukraine, and 18 of them were in this city of Lviv, where I was staying. So that was quite a welcoming trip. And eventually I arrived at my hometown, where I tried, let's say, for a couple of weeks, only 3 weeks, that I could manage to experience that. And even though my hometown is not the center, let's say, of the military operations, but still, even in the small town like mine, there are always sirens, there is always stress, there is always fear. So I had different, even traumatic experiences, I would say, during that stay that made me understood that I have to try to move on to survive. Otherwise, waiting, just waiting and being cold and frozen would just get me killed. So, yeah, after this trip, I understood that the war might not end soon, and I have to try to integrate myself in the new country. I choose Italy because, first of all, I already spoke in some Italian before arriving there. So, for some reason, for almost 10 years since I first came to Italy, I always liked to learn Italian as my hobby. Even living in China, I would listen to Italian songs and I would learn lyrics. I don't know why, but when I came to Italy, it already felt more as home, let's say, as it could be in the situation. I started a university. I decided to integrate myself, first of all, through Italian education, also to improve my academic Italian. So I started a master's degree in art direction, and I entered a refugee protection scheme. So after that, I lived in Centro di Accoglienza. So it's a center for Ukrainian refugees in Rome. And from there, I was really lucky to meet an association organization called Refugees Welcome Italia, who really helped me to get unstuck, I would say, from that frozen period of waiting and fear into the path of social inclusion, social integration, and I would say also mental health stability.
How would you describe your relationship with sports, with body movement as a child? What was this relationship like when you were a child, and what is your relationship with sports for you now?
Well, as a child, I was always doing sport activities like ballroom dancing, for example, and choreography. So, sport was always a big part of my life. Then, when I was a student, when I started traveling, I stopped doing it as much. But a couple of years before the war, I found capoeira movement, and it really connected my childhood interest in dancing, for example, with martial arts and self-defense, and also the community. So capoeira became a big part of my life before the war. When I did all of this transition and arrived in Italy for a couple of years, I actually stopped doing any kinds of sport because it was not the primary need. As I understand it right now, actually, I should have done that to improve mental health, but I did not. So eventually, with Refugees Welcome, for example, I started participating in different types of projects, social projects, including yoga, which really helped me to get some emotional balance, to calm down the nervous system. And another beautiful project that I participated, it's called Sailing Without Borders, which is organized by organization Mujeres in Mare. And I studied it last year. It's a project with sailing for social inclusion of women and girls. And it was also a very interesting experience because it's not only community building, but there is also a lot of shock therapy, I would say, because at times, there in the sea, there were situations quite drastic, I would say, for my personality. So at times you had to face some of your fears, some of your anxieties, and learn to work it through. And a very particular thing that I noticed during that type of sport, when we were learning to navigate, for example, sometimes it was a bit scary because you are also in charge of not only your own life, but also you are in charge of the life of another 5-7 people on the boat. And there was really this sense of, okay, you have anxiety right now, it's a panic attack, but you need to learn to calm yourself through in order to survive. So that sport, the sailing sport, was a very interesting, experience to go through especially in my situation. Not mentioning the community side of that, because it was a project only for women, because it's a feminist organization. And it was so nice, like to have this support, friendships. And even though we did not even, some of us spoke Italian, we were still really nicely supported and explained. So it was a very beautiful journey, I would say. Another thing, sport related, that I would say, as I just mentioned, I was doing capoeira before the war, and just earlier this year, I finally returned to capoeira here in Rome, and it just felt like going back home, to this imaginary home, to the state of your mind where you feel relaxed, when you feel peaceful, I would say. And it was the first time that I felt peaceful in couple of years. So one more time, sport is a very big part of my life, even though it's a very diverse types of sports. But it's what I see, a crucial part, a crucial pillar for also our mental health and social inclusion in a new country.
Thank you for touching upon that. Would you be able to expand a little bit more about what do you think makes sports such a great tool to create welcoming communities and to create inclusive environments, especially for women or young girls or anyone who might be victim of some form of marginalization?
Well, I think it all is rooted in our nervous system, not only like sociology part of the sociological part of that, but the basic physiology, human physiology. We all are communicating through our nervous systems, right? So our bodies are scanning other people every single moment in our lives. And when we are doing sport, we are getting synchronized, because about mirror neurons in our brains. So your brain is scanning another person who is doing similar activities as you, and even without talking, without sharing maybe the same language, your bodies are communicating on non-verbal level. So doing sport activities together, even in multicultural, multilingual environment, our bodies, they also create this hormone like oxytocin, for example, a hormone of love, of peace, of connection. So after we finish this activity, all of us would go home with the elevated state of these hormones of happiness, even not knowing that. But the impact of community sport on our brain is already scientifically proven. And I have experienced it on my own skin, but also understanding it from science point of view, it just makes me realize that we all have to try add some sport element, especially community sport, into our lives, especially if the person is refugee, migrant, or from marginalized communities.
How would you describe inclusion? What is inclusion for you?
For me personally, inclusion is actually something very internal. It's the sense or understanding or feeling of one particular person of safety within the social group. So it's a particular thing, because sometimes like everything can be done for the group to be included, but the person still feels isolated, right? So there are different techniques how to help include different types of people depending on their backgrounds and traumas. But essentially, it's a sense of safety within the community of other human beings.
What is a good practice that you would describe, or according to your own experience, about creating inclusive communities, perhaps through sports or perhaps through other tools? But can you think of a memorable event or a good practice that you would like to share with us?
Like memorable event, a good practice, for me, it's two different stories, let's say, because the events, sometimes they can be singular, but something very big and remarkable. And for the good practice, it's something that I would suggest do on the weekly basis. In general, what I perceive as good community practice is an activity where we have a particular person who already thinks about community building. It can be a teacher, it can be an assigned leader of that community, but there should be someone like a facilitator of this group with ideally professional background who could really create a safe space for people to talk, even a small talk, for example, before the actual physical practice. It's important to, again, synchronize our nervous systems. Then during the practice activity, there should be also very mindful strategy to include all people. So like not to give tasks that are too complicated, not to make, in any case, someone feel like a failure. Because that's some sports, it's easily to feel that you are incapable. So try to create the practice where there are different levels and explain it verbally to each of the person, to the group, that it's okay. We all have our different journeys and each of us is on the different point. So just do today whatever you feel comfortable, maybe like a little bit harder, that you did yesterday, but it's okay. And the final part, again, for me, what I've seen a really great experience when you have this final point of the trainings. I personally, I love hugging. And in capoeira, there is so many. In my group, there were so many different final points where we all hug, or like this group where everyone is putting their hands to the center and you're like 1, 2, 3, yeah. So this point and the final, final stage of the practice where you would all have this burst of dopamine. We have endorphins, we have oxytocin, and also dopamine, the excitement. So again, when everyone is leaving the practice, they are feeling, not enlightened, but uplifted, that you feel good about yourself, even though you tried today just a little bit harder, but you have this energetical, fulfilling. So that's the good practice that I think that ideally should be implemented to create this community effect. I would also would like to share capoeira event that I had. It's called Batizado. So in Batizado, it's an annual event for capoeira players where, you would meet your mestre, your, let's say, high belt master, and usually it can be a couple of days of training. There's a lot of actual food sharing. That's what I understood. But it's an intense event where there's so many communications with different people. Everyone is open and everyone is celebrated. Again, no matter which level of training you are, no matter what's your background or your, refugee status, it doesn't matter. The fact that you are participating here, it's already enough to celebrate you. So this event that I had a couple of years ago, the Batizado, it just, for now, I think it's the most exciting event that I have ever experienced in my life. There is also a lot of singing, a lot of in capoeira, a lot of music, a lot of hugs. But again, everything should be consciously designed, not only on the level of physical activity, but also on the level of neuroscience of the community. Sport had a direct impact to the desire of experiencing life and, thriving in life. So these are some of my views on practice, good practice and good event.
Has it ever happened to you especially in your work, professional experience, or even personal one, to experience someone else have such a breakthrough moment as you described you had during the Batizado in Capoeira? Did you witness someone else manage to feel welcomed and included through sport?
No, actually, like this particular event, it was not only me, it was a group sensation. And, some of my best friends that I have right now, I met her during that event. We've seen each other only twice in 5 years. 2 times we've seen physically. But that event created such a profound bonding between people, like acceptance, the unconditional love that with a lot of people, we just continue on talking almost daily. With this best friend, for example, for 5 years, we are talking almost daily, meeting physically in real world only twice. So I've seen a lot of people there. It's such a beautiful sense when your ego disappears and you are there in the state of present. You are so mindful and so connected to the group that all the joy is multiplied. So definitely I have experienced that, and I know that these kind of events could be replicated and should be replicated, because we as human beings, we need that sense of community. We all need that sense of acceptance, love, and also boost of the inspiration.
Thank you for sharing these elements with us. We see how your personal and professional experience are really intertwined in this tale, in this story that you're telling us about yourself. All of these fulfill you as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, sport is such a holistic part of me, So I believe that we cannot be fulfilled as a person without physical activity, without community. Even for the mental health, as you know, like the basics of mental health, you have to do sports. And it's like you can do whatever you want, or at least some walking, some jogging, some basic physical activities, but for your biology, and biology would impact your brain health and your mental health, it's crucial, it's mandatory to choose some sport or hobby that would enrich your health.
What do you think is missing, or what do you see is missing in Italy or in Rome, if you prefer, to create more welcoming environments for everyone, but especially for women and young girls with a migrant background?
Well, first of all, I think it's not yet enough, like the spaces where we can work on our physical activities and community building. There are a lot of projects, but comparing to the amount of migrants, refugees, or in general marginalized community, it's not yet as close to these communities. So I think what is missing is support from government. I think these sport activities and community building activities should be like directly guided and implemented to the governing systems. So from that, we can distribute, we can diffuse these activities, diffuse these projects into every community inside the city. Also make it accessible. We should create inclusive communities by also mixing together people that we are all putting into center, into the core, that we are all human beings, Doesn't matter your racial background or your sexual orientation or anything. We are all human beings. So that's why we all have a right to ask, for this support.
What did you learn along this path?
Oof. Well, I have learned a lot. I really understood the importance of community. If I would not have Refugees Welcome, for example, at that point, later they introduced me also to other organizations who support refugees and create projects, I would be stuck, I would be stuck in that anxiety, in that frozen state of fear and isolation. Different situations throughout my path, I understood that I can reach out, I can ask for help when I need to, and that's okay. And if I would not be open to integrate myself, to enter this, the new world in Italy, the new society.
What do you wish to find further along in this path?
My dream right now and my goal is to create inclusive, creative community. Now I'm working on my association, which is called Sensi Holistic Creative Agency, and that's exactly what we are trying to do. Holistically help people thrive, help people develop themselves while creating this community of friends, community of like-minded people who accept you just the way you are.
Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you. Do you have a final word or thought for us?
Thank you so much for inviting me and for letting me share some of the ideas. Final word. I would say, be proactive to everyone, not only for refugees or migrants. Being proactive is the most important thing to get unstuck and to start living. Whether it's sport communities, whether it's volunteering activities, like whatever field that is resonating with you, but just follow your call and we can all create this beautiful world